Good morning, everybody. If you're not doing your Christmas shopping, I thought I'd come and say hi and talk about something I've seen over 14 years. And it happens to me too. It is the curse of being knowledgeable, an expert, good at what you do. And I wanted to talk about it today because actually I see this getting in a lot of people's way. And so if you're watching me and you know what you're doing, you've got experience, you've got knowledge, you're a technical expertise, whatever that looks like, you will have felt this. And I'm just going to mute my phone because it's just decided to go berserk as soon as I go live. So the curse of being good at what you do, the curse of being knowledgeable, the curse of being a subject matter expert is huge. This stops people moving forward. It stops you winning business. It stops you taking action, and it disconnects you from the very people you want to connect with. So I thought what I'd do is I'd share my thoughts today on what I've seen from doing 14 years in the field of what these issues look like. So let's just dig into them. So I've got a few points. I've wrote them down so I can get them out concisely. But if you've got any depth of experience, expertise, or knowledge, that gives you a huge advantage in your subject matter area. But here's the biggest of them all of where it falls down. When you get really deep into a subject matter area, a topic or whatever it is, you get blinded to where the average person is. So the fact that I'm sat on LinkedIn, and I'll give you my example, right? I use LinkedIn more than the majority of people on planet Earth. So I use it in and out all day long, and there are millions of things, little tiny things on LinkedIn that I take for granted, which are nuggets to the average user. And lots of experts do this. They have these nuggets of wisdom, of expertise that they basically dismiss as being obvious or basic. And so they never share them. And they get frustrated when they see somebody sharing something so basic, so simple, and going, why are people even interested in that? Because in the scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. And this is that disconnect between when you're nerded out in your subject matter area, when you're nerded into what you do, you actually get blinded from where the average person is. And so you value way more depth than they do. And we'll look at this angle from another side in a moment. But the fundamental big one is you are an expert in something, talking to non-experts. And somewhere in that, we lose sight of where we are versus they are. And so what happens is we share things that they don't fully understand, go over their heads. All of that stuff happens. So we dismiss what seems basic, which is actually incredibly valuable to somebody else who doesn't have our experience, expertise, knowledge, all that good stuff. So that is a big one that kind of becomes a curse, and you're constantly having to look at, and this is what I do. I go and look at forums and people asking questions to go, where are they at? Because often I'm looking, and this hurts me as well, I'm looking for what can I say that will add value. And I dismiss all the things that are basic because they don't feel valuable enough. And then I don't know what to share because I think it's not valuable enough. And it's because I'm out of step with where my target audience is. I don't know, let's say I'm 20 steps ahead of my target audience. My content should actually just be maybe one step ahead. And because of my depth of knowledge and because of your depth of knowledge, we miss that and we dismiss the basic stuff, which would actually be incredibly valuable to your target audience. So that's a real big one I see a lot. And then the second one is the pursuit of accuracy. When you know your topic really, really well, you want to be precise. you want to be accurate as possible. Yeah. And so often what you'll do is you'll add more nuance and explanation into everything you say because you want it to be accurate and you don't want it to be misinterpreted. But actually what you do is you flood a simple point with loads of nuance that gets lost. And so you think you're being accurate, you want to be precise, you want to be grounded, you want to be all of those things, but actually inadvertently all the information that goes round the point you're making actually overwhelms people. And instead of them feeling more confident about you, they actually feel more confused. And so explaining too much, trying to make the point make sense, justify the point, actually confuses people. And I do this quite a bit sometimes. So just make your points and avoid over-explaining. You might not see it as over-explaining. You might see it as just, it's the nuance of what the point I'm making, which is really important. People understand the nuance. No, they just need to understand the point. The comment section, the discussion, they can message you and ask more questions. And sometimes we overwhelm people with nuance when we're just trying to make a point. So over-explaining is a big, big, big one that I know I fall into sometimes. Then the third one, yeah. If you've done, and if you've got years and years of experience, right, you know that there's more than one way to swing a cat. You know that there's options. There's lots of different ways to do something. Yeah. And you might go, oh, you could do it this way. 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 But we know from the paradox of choice that too many options makes people hesitate, makes people not decide. And so inadvertently, us giving people options or too many options, we actually make it more complicated. We actually make it too complicated for people and they don't make a decision. And I see this with experts on sales calls where they basically give too much information, too many options, and prospects don't make a decision. But also, if you're trying to sell what you're doing, for an example, people want to buy something concrete. And so you know, actually, there's nuance, there's complexity, there's different ways, different approaches. If you put that all into your marketing, you basically give people far too many options. They make no choices. And so I say this a lot to people selling their expertise on LinkedIn. I'll say to them, what you need to do is be very, very careful here that you can help people in 5 different ways, but you can't market effectively 5 different ways. You might have a one-to-one program, a group program, an online course, a retreat. You might have this, you might have that, you might have the other. And to you, they're all important. But to actually get other people to make a decision, they need to evaluate one thing and make their mind up. They don't need lots of options. And sometimes with us wanting to give those options, to stay open to those options, we actually make it harder for people to choose. It's a common thing when you got a lot of knowledge and you know that basically things aren't as simple as that. We know that, right? If you've got any depth of experience, it's not as simple as just that. But actually people need to make a decision. They need clear information and go, yes, that. The more options we give them, the more confusion, the more they wait, the more they pause, the more they hesitate. Now, this is a big one as well. Yeah. And I often talk about this with clients about outcome statements. And it is, if you've got years and years of experience in any field, you know what can go wrong. I've seen it. I've seen people sign up for my program and not do the work. And I've seen people who just don't take your advice, sign up for your stuff and just don't take your advice. So you've seen what can go wrong. You know that there's a lot of variables that happen, and particularly in sales and marketing. You can send the same message to one person and sell something, the same message there, and they block you. So there is variables. And sometimes when we know that things can go wrong, we actually end up being more cautious and more nuanced in our message to the point where people don't see the value in it. So for an example, or you're more cautious because you know what can go wrong, so you don't take that step. You hesitate, you delay, you move more slowly. So I've seen this with, like, I can help you get clients on LinkedIn, for an example. That's something I talk about a lot, right? But there is a fundamental requirement of the client to follow my advice. There is a fundamental requirement of the client to do the work. But as an expert, you feel nervous about going, I can help you get clients because you know that you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so this hesitation, because you've seen that there isn't a guarantee in real life. All these people who promise absolute guarantees, we know that that's not possible. It's not realistic. It's just a mechanism to reduce hesitation in buying. But when you really understand your subject matter area and you really care about what you do, you end up actually hesitating in places that actually you shouldn't hesitate. As an expert, you've got the best track record to be able to help people achieve a result. And sometimes because you've seen the nuance that goes into getting a result, you pull back. Or when something feels like it is more risky because you understand the risks, you actually tread more carefully. And then somebody who doesn't understand the risks as clearly marches ahead of you and kind of does your idea. I had this client and they got really annoyed because one of their competitors launched something that they were thinking about doing. And I was a bit shy and timid, and I didn't tell them what I was thinking. I was like, well, if you thought about doing, why have you not done it? And they were just tinkering and hesitating about, what if this isn't right? What if that isn't right? Meanwhile, somebody who by all rights isn't as experienced just went and did it, not really fully realizing the risk, but they lapped them on it. So that's a really big one. The hesitation you do because you know the variables and the detail. In other words, the detail doesn't make you better. Sometimes it can actually make you more cautious. And I see that a lot with people with long years of experience. Another one that's a big one, being accurate over being clear. Landing your message, is far more important than anything else. If people don't get it, it doesn't matter how good you are. And so sometimes that kind of, it's a bit to the point earlier, over explaining, nuance, all of that gets lost with with too much complexity. You need to just be clear and go, how do I make this point as clear as possible for these people who haven't got the benefit of my past experiences or my journey? How can I be more clear? And sometimes people value precision over clarity. And so that then muddies their message, confuses their message, and people don't get it. It's kind of an expansion of the over-explaining, but it's like, how do I make the point as clear as possible? And sometimes what we do is I do this sometimes with analogies. I try and use an analogy and then go, I can't use that analogy because it's not exactly perfect. It's not an exact version of the analogy. And so I end up not using the analogy, which could have been useful for just making it more clear to somebody than precision. Sometimes clarity matters more than precision. And I know that sounds like wrong, but if somebody gets the basic message and understands it, that's better than actually the nuance and missing it. So that's a big one. Now, this one is the number one reason why most smart people never get business. Never get business. I see this in multi-industry. I see it in my industry. I see it in every industry I see. And it is this: when you're deep in your subject matter, when you're deep in your expertise, you've nerded out on it. And that's not a derogatory sense. But when you're in that depth of what you know, you tend to think in process. You tend to think about, we have to do these things to get to that result. And this is common across all different industries, that we think in process. Yeah, we think in journey. But clients commit to journeys based on the destinations. And so what happens is we go, oh yeah, we can we can, it's like going to a travel agent, right? You go to a travel agent because you want to go on holiday and you've got somewhere in mind. The travel agent kind of wants to find out where you want to go and then will show you how they'll get you there. The same is true for marketing or selling your expertise in any way, shape, or form. From an expert's point of view, it's about process. It's about we do these things to get to change where you are to where you want to be. But we're very bad at talking about where they want to be. We tend to lean heavily on process, and people don't value processes until they see where it gets them. And this is a common thing for any expert, technical person, is actually they focus on the process and it disconnects from them from non-technical, non-expert people. So you see this a lot in cybersecurity. Oh, you could do this endpoint layer, blah, 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 blah. Right, what are we trying to do? And outcomes really matter to buyers. Outcomes matter more to non-experts. So instinctively, if you've got a lot of experience, you will automatically, like autopilot, jump into process. But before a client will want to engage with you, before a person will want to engage with you on a process, they will want to know, where does this process get them the outcomes? So it's a common issue that people fall into. The second part of that, which actually these two link, is outcomes are hard to define if you don't know who you're helping. And I spoke about this yesterday on a live on LinkedIn, where I said about if you want a personal brand that sells, you have to become a specialist. If you're talking to too broad an audience, too many people, you'll find it difficult to name any outcomes because the outcomes are different for different groups. So the mental space that you have to actually think about outcomes gets more fuzzy because there's multiple people and multiple scenarios in your head at any one time. And that translates into a very fuzzy, woolly, process-driven message. And then what happens is people reading what you're saying go, this seems interesting, but I'm not sure how it applies to me. This seems kind of like this person knows what they're doing, but I don't see why it matters for me. And it's because in your head, you've got too many people and too many issues going on. And, particularly in our world as it is today, where people's attention spans are very, very poor. I did a meme on LinkedIn about Netflix, how much time we spend scrolling Netflix, being picky about what we watch. If you imagine how picky people are about watching stuff, how much are they picky about paying attention to you, to me, to everybody else? It's got to be, you've got to think about, I can't please all of the people all of the time. You can't please most people all of the time. You'll be lucky in reality if you can please one persona at a time. And so that trying to help too broadly, trying to talk to too many people at once will actually confuse the message. You'll end up vague, generic, and catch all, and nobody will see, this applies to me. Now, this is another one that I'm gonna do two more, and then I'm gonna wrap up and get on with my day, and you can get on with your day, wrapping presents or whatever you're doing. So the more you learn about your topic, the more you realize, what you don't know. The more you get into your topic, the more you realize what you don't know. And that actually creates a crisis of confidence. And this is really strange, that the more you know about your subject matter area, the more you realize you don't know, and the more you forget the basics of what you know. And basically, you end up spinning round in complexity. Overthinking everything you want to say, oversharing, going into too much detail. And the key bit of being an expert, I think we lose sight of an expert, what an expert is sometimes, or a subject matter expert. A subject matter expert their primary job in all commercial forms is to help somebody else make sense of something that does not have the expertise. An expert's job is to make sense of something for somebody else. So if I've got a whole load of paperwork of financial accounts and I don't understand them, the expert's job is not to make me an expert. The expert's job is to help me understand what all this means. Yeah. And that's where we miss. Yeah. Sometimes we think, oh, I've got to make people an expert like me. No, that's teaching. An expert's job is to help people understand what all of this means for them specifically, so they can make better choices, better decisions. And so what we tend to do is spin round, lose sight and think, oh, I've got to teach people my expertise. No, you have to help them make sense of the situations they've got so that they understand where they are, what they're at, where they're at, and what some of their next steps could be. But when we get lost in our own knowledge, we end up trying to teach people to become experts, and we end up appealing to other experts who go, this was a useful piece, or the only people who get what we're doing are actually other people who do what we do. So your job is actually not to learn more and get better and better and better. That's helpful. But your job is to actually simplify it for people who are not experts. Make it more understandable. It's not to teach them everything you know. It's to help them understand it. If you're in court and you get an expert witness there, the expert witness's job in the courtroom is not to tell you everything they know about their field. It is to help the judge, the jury, or whoever's in the courtroom understand what that means so that they can make decisions, so that they can make judgments, so they can take next steps. And that's where we get really lost. And then the final one I'm going to share, is that all of your expertise and skills are assets, right? It's about, so that your knowledge is an asset. Yeah, it's an asset. And your expertise, your skill set is an asset. And in itself, it is not valuable. I know you're going to get upset with me here. It's not valuable until you commercialize it. Your knowledge, your expertise, your years of experience is not valuable until you commercialize it. In other words, you have a model of how you make money from your knowledge, wisdom, whatever it is you've got. That is a business model. And many experts think that their knowledge will sell itself. Just like people say the product sells itself. It's not true. You have to have a model to demonstrate that knowledge in a commercial way that people go, it's worth investment, and have a system to do that over and over and over and over and over again. Now, a lot of people will rely on referrals, and that's fine, but they're not reliable, they're not sustainable. Sorry, my dog's going nuts. So you have to have a model to convert your knowledge into a revenue machine. Now, you might find that a little icky because, you might be in a more personal services area like coaching, or you might be, in something like legal where that whole thing about money, the money conversations are icky. But that's fundamental business. So what happens is a lot of experts, a lot of subject matter experts are really good here in the kind of knowledge piece, but never invest in building their commercial model in any serious way. Anybody can leave corporate and ride on their referrals and get some consulting work, hit and miss consulting work. And sometimes they land on their feet and they get some regular gigs and it kind of works out. And that can work. But more often than not, people end up having to commercialize their model. And unfortunately, many experts end up commercializing their model by force. And that's because economic pressures, lack of clients, lack of revenue. And that's the real wrong place to be. What we should be doing is going, if I'm leaving my employment and I'm going to go as a consultant, I'm going to, whatever it is, you know the model before you switch. And unfortunately, many people don't do that. So it can be a curse because you know how valuable, you know the difference you can make, you know how cool the changes you and the transformations you can be, but actually you need a revenue and business model that goes, I have to convey that to other people so that they are motivated to pay me to have that same thing. And most people don't build that. And that's the fundamental engine that I spend time on my programs working with clients to actually build, because they rarely build it. If you've got a big network of contacts from your past work, you can ride that for a long, long time. And it feels good to ride that because it's easy work in one sense. It's compared to actually going to the market and actually having a value proposition to complete strangers. Having a network feed you business is brilliant until it doesn't. And that's when people's commercial model, their business model, gets exposed that there isn't one. And what all they've been doing is basically riding off their past reputation, which is tough to do long term, unless you go, you make it big style, end up, huge big style. But you've got to have a commercial model. So these are the curses of being good at what you do. These are the curses of being great in terms of your subject matter, your knowledge, your expertise. They can and they are an asset, but they are only assets if you understand the blind spots they create, if you understand how they can kind of disconnect you from the people who will actually pay you. And don't be disillusioned by this. It just goes, okay, I've got all this knowledge. These are just the flaws of being great at what I do, the downsides. I know for myself, I have, because I'm good in some areas, it's almost like the opposite area. I know I'm going to be weak. If you're really good on the knowledge and the delivery for clients, the acquisition of clients is going to be your weak spot. And it's just the nature of the beast. So don't, sulk, don't beat yourself up. Don't go, oh, I've done that, Dean, I feel terrible. It's just the nature of the beast. And it will, you learn to adapt to some of these things. You learn to go, okay, am I sat in expert mode here? I need to get out and think like a client. Stop doing this, think like a client, Dean. And it gets easier. It does get easier. So you're not behind. You're not at a disadvantage to anybody else. Every subject matter expert in whatever field where they've got depth of knowledge, depth of experience, goes through these things. And they don't go away, they just get easier. As you start to realize you do this, you start to become aware of it and you realize, okay, I'm thinking like I'm in the wrong headspace here, I need to shift. And you will adapt to it. But the first start is realizing these are your issues, realizing these are your challenges. Because once you know you've got them, it's much easier to counter them. But I'll leave you with one final thought. You need that business model. You need that business model. If you want, I have a philosophy, and I think it's powerful because it helps you build a good, solid commercial model. It is this: you should always have more demand for your expertise than supply. If you don't, you will have to be more aggressive in what you do to win business. You should always have more demand than there is supply. And you create the demand. You and your business model should be creating the demand. If it isn't, we should talk. But fundamentally, for you to be in that place where your business is prospering, you're in your genius zone, you have to have more demand than supply. Otherwise, you have to market like crazy and you have to do the crazy things that some people do to fill their diaries and fill their calendars. So Your business model has to create the demand for you, and you should always have more demand than supply. And if you do that, everything works. Everything works. Right. Enjoy your Christmas wrapping and doing whatever you're doing, running around the shops like crazy people, buying presents. I might do a live tomorrow. I'll see what happens. But have a great